The front on our section was relatively quiet. The fighting was reduced to minor artillery duels and skirmishes between squads out on reconnaissance. But because of Russian snipers, every German soldier felt incredible tension. It was very dangerous even just to stick out of the trench in the immediate vicinity of the front line. But despite all precautions, the Russians found targets again and again. While in the trenches, the soldiers are faced with the need to go to their natural needs. For hygienic reasons, they can't litter the trenches with excrement. Therefore, after a few days at the front, every German infantryman adapted to use empty tin cans as a toilet. Once the can was filled, the odor emanating from it, and the grumbling of their comrades encouraged the soldiers to dispose of their contents. This was done by spilling the can over the edge of the trench. Inexperienced soldiers sometimes lifted themselves too high for fear of getting the trench dirty. A good sniper could not help but use such an opportunity for an accurate shot. I avoided a suicidal return to the ranks as a machine gunner. I now reported directly to the company commander. By this point, the combat situation was such that the company was mainly engaged in holding its own positions, and the commander allowed me to go hunting within our company's area. I had a sense of where to start. I went around the trenches to ask my comrades about what they had seen around. I was greeted with enthusiasm. The commander of a group of machine gunners took me by the sleeve and led me into a covered trench. Through a gap between the massive logs laid along the edges of the trench to protect me from enemy bullets and shell splinters, he showed me the Russian positions and explained. Somewhere in there is a sniper. He shoots at anything that strikes him as suspicious. Look, even the dishes we lifted over the trench have bullet holes in them. Stretching my eyes through the 8x binoculars, I looked at the surrounding area through a small hole between the logs, but could not see anything special. Then I asked to raise my cape tent over the edge of the trench, hoping in this way to track down the Russian sniper. The latter turned out to be rather unsophisticated in his business and fired as soon as the cap showed over the edge of the trench. I saw a flash on the muzzle of the enemy's rifle barrel, flashed like a gust of wind from behind a pile of fallen trees. Now that I knew where the Russian sniper was hiding, I could finally take out my telescopic sight, which I had hidden before, so that the glare from its lenses would not attract the enemy before the time. Thus, having already gone sniper hunting for the first time, I intuitively felt one of the most important features of my new craft. Unlike my opponent, I understood the first law of survival: don't shoot at a target you haven't exactly seen or identified. Shoot only once from one position and then immediately change it or become invisible within its confines. My opponent stayed in his position and waited for a new target. It was a fatal mistake for which he had to pay with his life. I carefully placed a twisted cloak tent in front of the logs to rest on, and carefully poked the barrel of my rifle into the gap. I could not use my telescopic sight, for the slit was too narrow. But the Russian lay only 100 meters away from me, and I could aim in the usual way, using the front sight and the sighting bar. Suddenly I became nervous. My comrades were waiting for a perfect shot, and I suddenly realized that for the first time in my life I had to kill a man in cold blood and calculatingly. I had to lower my rifle and take a few deep breaths to regain consciousness. And at that moment I regained my composure. As if in a dream, with the precision of a machine, my index finger pressed the trigger. I tensed up, took a deep inhale and exhale, held my breath and pulled the trigger. A shot rang out. Because of the dust in front of me, I couldn't see if I had hit or not. But my comrade, who was looking through another gap between the logs, started shouting, I had hit the target. It was a perfect shot. Like a fire through the bush, through the trenches, the news began to spread that the Russian sniper was finished. Suddenly there were machine gun bursts and rifle shots. Someone shouted attack. Amazed by such an unexpected German assault, the Russians began to hastily abandon their forward trenches and retreat to their main line of defense. Meeting no resistance, the German soldiers stormed the positions they had left behind. I was among them. I and the witnesses to my first shot wanted to see its results. We ran up to a pile of fallen trees, behind which the Russian sniper was hiding. It turned out that there he had made a hollow, like a trench, in which his lifeless body now lay. The sniper's head and torso were covered with blood. Grabbing him by the ankles, 2 soldiers pulled him out to see exactly where the fatal wound was. A bloody mess of brains and bone fragments covered the sniper's back. There was a hole in the back of the Russian's head the size of a fist, so that through it they could look inside his skull, which was empty because of the bullet. The experienced fighters, accustomed to this sort of thing, turned him over on his back to look at the face of the dead man, who appeared to be a boy, perhaps only 16 years old. My bullet entered his right eye. I aptly took him down, and I did so from almost 100 meters without a scope. I looked down at my victim with a mixture of pride, horror, and guilt. Suddenly I felt myself getting sick to my stomach. Although I was ashamed of such a public display of weakness, my comrades were warm and understanding of the fact that I had lost control of myself at that moment. A flask was handed to me and I gratefully took a big gulp. The Germans were driven back as quickly as they had driven the Russians back before. In an hour everything was back to square one and everyone was in their original positions. But I had passed my sniper's examination, and my comrades were telling everyone about my success. The praise showered on me from all sides helped me to get rid of my doubts about what I had done. I firmly learned the second lesson: war is a ruthless thing, and you have to kill, or be killed. In combat, compassion for the enemy is suicide, because every enemy you don't kill will kill you in the next second. Your chances of survival increase in direct proportion to your military skills and your lack of compassion for the enemy. That's the principle I followed for the rest of the war. If the enemy was in my sights and my finger was on the trigger, the enemy's fate was sealed without exception. That same day I managed to shoot 2 more carefree Russian soldiers. Full of youthful pride, I made 3 notches on the butt of my rifle with a penknife. I followed this ritual the entire time I had my Russian rifle with telescopic sight with me. I maintained this suicidal habit until my comrade tragically died the following year. Right after my first successes, the commander told me that I had to report my successful shots to company headquarters, each time naming witnesses to my hits from among the officers. But only those hits that I made while firing alone, not during a general attack or defense of a position, were counted. I had to keep a little book with my sniper score, and witnesses had to confirm whenever that score was increased. For every 10 hits I scored, I was awarded a silver patch, 7 centimeters long and 1 wide, like those on the collars of junior officers. Such patches were worn on the left forearm. But getting confirmation of hits was exhausting. Some of my commanders were jealous of my success and refused to sign it. This happened especially often if my hits were observed by artillery spotters, who in most cases were young officers full of military idealism. They considered snipers to be dirty killers and expressed their antipathy by refusing to confirm their hits. Another reason why relations between snipers and artillerymen were strained was that snipers were in the habit of stealing better gunners' uniforms than their own. In particular, jackets, capes, and raincoats. I became the master of such unofficial acquisition of officers' uniforms. Over the next 14 days, my sniper shots reached the target 27 times, and my new specialty quickly became routine. As a rookie, I was nevertheless exceptionally lucky, as Russian snipers avoided me, unaware that I was not really a professional. The part of the front where my company was located remained relatively quiet. This gave me the opportunity to learn from my own experience and my own mistakes. Most novice snipers did not have such an opportunity, and they often paid for their mistakes with their lives. However, this quiet period soon came to an end. On August 18, 1943, after Russian pressure had been building for several days, the Soviets launched a massive attack along the entire length of the front. With a crushing superiority in numbers of fighters, the Russians were able to break through the German defense lines and the Wehrmacht infantry was forced to abandon their positions. In my commander, I found a wise mentor who understood the benefits of snipers and lamented the lack of them in the German army. However, this view was not widespread. Many officers perceive snipers as dishonorable, treacherous killers and refuse to use them. One officer reflected this attitude quite specifically in his memoirs. Each of these thugs crawls out at dawn or before dusk and lies motionless, watching enemy positions like a cat over a mouse hole. And then, for a moment, only a shoulder or a head will emerge from the trench. But even a moment is enough. A shot breaks the silence. An empty tin can falls out of his cramped hand. That's the price of human life for a sniper. Such is war. However, the remark at the end of the officer's comments above is fair enough. War cannot be ethical or heroic. It is a means of achieving a political objective through maximum violence, the price of which is death, injury, and destruction. Accordingly, it makes absolutely no difference whether you are killed by a sniper's bullet or by the splinter of a mine fired from a mortar. And if you look at things from this point of view, it is inappropriate to talk about honor. All the more so because it begs a logical question. Who is more honest and courageous in battle, an officer who sends an entire company into a bloody meat grinder in the name of achieving some strategic goal, for the sake of personal glory or as a result of tactical incompetence? Or a cunning but highly effective sniper who constantly exposes himself to considerable risk?